Go ahead.
Welcome to Global Kinship, Exploring the Evolving Noosphere, a monthly webinar sponsored by Creation Spirituality Communities, led by a team of three, Penny Andrews, Bob Eisenberger, and myself, Gail Ransom. The noosphere was foreseen by Pierre Desjardins 100 years ago as an evolving layer of human consciousness that would grow to envelop the earth. This collection of human intelligence, creativity, and wisdom has been evolving as humans evolved over the last 300,000 years. Now, with the acceleration of today's technology, the noosphere is increasingly exponentially growing around the globe, and we are poised for a leap forward in our evolution. But our ascension into a kind and cohesive species is not guaranteed. We need to choose it over and over again. We are grateful to have Matthew Fox join us today to walk us through the dynamics of the dark counter energies that are bent on preventing our success. The dark energy he discussed in his latest book, Trump and the Maga Movement as Antichrist, a handbook for the 2024 election. Welcome.
Thank you, Gail. On a quick technical note, we simply ask that everyone keep themselves muted unless or until it's time for our Q&A and you have a question to ask. When that time comes, we ask that you raise your hand by finding your reactions button on the Zoom toolbar. Under there, you'll see the words raise hand. That will take you to the front of the line and we'll be able to get everyone in sequence. Now, Penny.
The event slide?
Yeah, hang on. It's not wanting to come up. Here we go.
In the next few days, Matt has some wonderful opportunities to go deeper. And they are, starting tomorrow, a panel discussion on mysticism, spirituality, and psychedelics. On October 16th, a post-doom spirituality conversation with Margaret Wheatley and Brian McLaren. And then on October 17th, join him as he discusses two of his books. In the Beginning, There Was Joy, and The Return of Father Sky online. And all of them can be registered at www.matthewfox.org/coming events. Dennis, would you like to update us on how to access the book that he'll be addressing?
Yes. Hi, everyone. So if you've ordered the book from matthewfox.org, they are all shipping out and in transit. And if you ordered from Amazon, you can make comments in Amazon. That's important because that helps with the promotion of the book. If you order from matthewfox.org, the book will be in color, and it's quite colorful and very nice glossy color images inside. And the book can be purchased at matthewfox.org as a paperback audiobook. And of course, you can go to Amazon and Barnes and Noble and purchase the ebook in color. So thank you.
Thank you.
Yeah, I believe you had some opening words for us, please.
Okay, thank you. To orient ourselves to the dynamics of the communal human, I would like to show you a clip of the opening of the Millennial Footbridge in London, which happened in June of the year 2000. It was a stunning design and had been vetted by England's top architects and engineers. But the bridge had been designed for individuals, and on the inaugural crossing, as crowds poured onto the bridge, their steps began to synchronize. Their gait took on a coordinated swinging movement that made the entire bridge sway and wobble. soon after the bridge was closed for redesign. It is our cosmic imperative to bond in communities. We soar and spin in a community of planets. We are descended from multicellular creatures, and our murmurations of molecules that become pre-teens in matching genes, choristers on choir robes, sports teams in their jerseys, and fans in the stands rising in synchronized waves of celebration. Together we are strong, yes, but too much sameness can cause us the ability to behave in ways that are not true to our own wisdom. We can be seduced into feelings and behaviors that are not our own. As here we see all of these people not planning to weave back and forth in a dance, a dangerous dance on this bridge, but they got caught up in it. At this moment, we are being pulled, or rather pressured, to do just that, to move away from our basic feelings and values. Some people have succumbed. In April 1831, a brigade of British soldiers marched in step across England's Brompton Bridge. The rhythm of their feet matched the frequency of the structure, and the bridge broke apart beneath their feet, throwing dozens of men into the water. Since then, British soldiers are required to break stride and walk independently across the bridge to get from one side to another. Sounds like good advice.
Nope. Sorry, that's the
That's
wrong.
okay. That's fine. That's fine. We'll just stick with that one. That's great.
All
That's
right.
good. Yeah, that's good. Thank you, Bob. So now I'd like to introduce Matthew, and I'm honored to do that. The more I look at his resume for something that's happening, the more astounded I am of how much he has done in his time here on Earth with and leading us. Matthew Fox is a spiritual theologian, an Episcopal priest, and an activist for gender justice and eco-justice. He has written 37 books that have been translated into other languages over 70 times. Among them are Original Blessing, The Coming of the Cosmic Christ, A Spirituality Named Compassion, The Reinvention of Work, The Hidden Spirituality of Men, Christian Mystics, and The Pope's War. He has contributed much to the rediscovery of Hildegard of Bingen, Meister Eckhart, and Thomas Aquinas as pre-modern mystics and prophets. Matthew Fox has changed the minds and actions of thousands, young and old. Besides his many books, Fox has reinvented ritual through the Cosmic Mass. He has reinvented pedagogy through the University of Creation Spirituality and the Yale Law Project. And he has reignited activism with his liberating theology. Fox holds a doctorate in the history and theology of spirituality from the Institut Catholique de Paris and the founder of the University of Creation Spirituality in California. He conducts dozens of workshops every year and is visiting scholar at the Academic for the Love of Learning. Matt, welcome. And welcome to this news and help in making it through the next 30-some days. Thank you.
There's 3 up here.
And you got you on mute, Matt.
You're muted now.
See if you can get him off. Yeah, there you go.
Thank you, Gail, and thank you, Penny and Bob, and Free Spirituality Communities organization. Does such good work and still at it. So I'm glad to be here with all of you and to discuss my latest book. And it's kind of an unusual book. It's short. Not all my books are this short. In fact, not all, I don't think. It also has 10 cleanings in it. And it was born of an experience this summer in June. It's certainly the fastest book I ever gave birth to. But it was in June that we were in Orvieto, Italy, for a week workshop on Thomas Aquinas, because this was the 800th anniversary of his birth. And he was, at times, he taught in Orvieto, and he wrote poetry in Orvieto. So it seemed like a good place to honor him that way. And we had a wonderful workshop. And of course, as usual, I brought artist meditation teachers with me and so forth. But the second to last day there, I visited the cathedral, and there's a chapel inside of a big chapel with a large wall with a fresco on it. And I didn't know the title of the fresco. I just stared at it for a while, and I said to myself, well, that looks like Christ preaching away. But then as I looked more deeply into it, I realized there was something off. This was an odd Christ. His hair was odd, and there was a demon whispering in his ear. And then I looked at the title of the painting, and it was the Antichrist. And I think we have the painting, don't we, to show, Bob?
Yes, we do.
Yeah, might as well look at it together. And I counted 156 characters in the painting. Oh, that's okay. Well, that's the title that's the cover of the book, which is a close-up.
There we go.
No, no, that's not it. Um, it's the please, no, no, that's
No, sorry, Matt. I had them in
yeah,
sequence, I thought.
no, that's not this. There. Keep going.
There we
There,
go.
that's the painting. No, please back up.
Back up.
Yes,
There you go.
there. That's the overall painting, and then we have a few close-ups of it. But it's very large fresco on a whole side of the chapel, and there's a lot going on here. As I say, I counted 156 people in this painting, including Christopher Columbus. The painting was done in 1503 by Luca Signorelli, and the church was built just shortly after it was begun to be built shortly after Aquinas' death. So that would be late 13th century. And so if you look at the picture here, you'll see these, someone has called them in the background there, um, uh, ninja warriors in black. Someone else has called them Ku Klux Klan in black. But there is something sinister about those people in black dancing in the back. And of course, the front fellow up front is the Antichrist with the devil whispering to him. And in front of his pedestal is a lot of goodies that have been tossed his way by rich people who want favors. And you'll see on the left, for example, people are being beat up. There's violence in the crowd. Some people are dead, some are wounded. And in the back, toward the middle, there's healing going on because the Antichrist is not without powers, and he sometimes can do healings. And on the right, there is a beheading going on. The Antichrist is killing Elias and Enoch, prophets of old. And on the left, you have the devil being thrown out of heaven toward earth. And in the far left-hand corner is the self-portrait of the artist, Luca Signorelli, and next to him is Fra Angelico, because Fra Angelico, the Dominican artist, did actually paint two paintings in this chapel as well, but not in this particular picture. Now, why don't we turn to the next picture, because it is a close-up. And there you have, okay, right, a close-up of the preacher. And notice he's pointing at himself. So narcissism is intrinsic to the Antichrist. And notice how linked he is with the devil. Not just is the devil whispering in his ear, but they're sharing the same left arm. So this picture is about deeds as well as ideas. That the Antichrist shares deeds with the demons. And it's interesting that in Islam, in Arabic, the word for Satan means the whisperer, the whisperer. And in this crowd to the right are some famous people and some ordinary people, but one of the famous people is Christopher Columbus, which I find very interesting because this was finished in 1503, and of course he came to America in 1492, or left for America. So it's very contemporary that this artist is bringing our contemporary people into this scene, which to me gives us permission to bring contemporary goings on and individuals into our reproduction of this archetype of the Antichrist. Now, behind on the right hand side behind are Dominicans and Carmelites and Franciscans who are checking their texts and so forth about what the Antichrist is preaching. So they are the resistors, if you will, in this particular painting. Okay, let's show the next picture. And this is a close-up of the communication between the Antichrist and demon. Now, the archetype of the Antichrist, of course, in Christianity is in the last book, especially in the last book of the Christian Bible, the book of Apocalypse. And the texts for that come from Daniel and other places, the book of Daniel. But, and of course, that text was the last text written in the Christian Bible around the year 100, when, of course, Christians were being persecuted in a strong way by the empire. So some people will say that Nero was the Antichrist, the original Antichrist, if you will, named by the author or authors of the Book of Apocalypse. So again, it was grounded in history, in what was going on in the day, just as the 16th century painting by Luca was. Now in the 12th century, let's show now, we can turn to Hildegard and begin because she painted a picture of the Antichrist. And we just had it, this is the Christ. Okay, there we go. There's the Antichrist as painted by Hildegard. And it's interesting because in many ways it's a X-rated painting by a doctor, a saint and doctor of the church. In the left-hand corner, now I have a whole chapter on this in the book because her take on the Antichrist is powerful, obviously from this painting, but also from her commentary on it. So in the upper left-hand corner, you have these 5 animals. She identifies who they are and what they're doing, but they represent that they're creating chaos. They are undoing the order of the universe and of society. One of them is luxury living, and another one is warlikeness, and another one is greed. So they are pulling on rope, and in that way they're undoing the bonds that keep society and the universe together. And her painting of the Christ, which is over my shoulder, the man in sapphire blue, is you'll see that there are the golden ropes there that keep the universe together. But here, evil undoes that order and creates disorder. Now, in the right-hand column on the top is Christ. She says, as a young man, he happens to be doing a peace symbol, we would call a peace symbol, but he is bringing peace. He's bringing together those 2 walls, she says, stand for knowledge and speculative knowledge. And speculative knowledge is knowing that you are an image of God. The word speculum in Latin means mirror, that you are a mirror of divinity. So that's what Christ is bringing to combat the Antichrist. Now, in the bottom picture on the left is Mother Church being invaded by the Antichrist. And she says there's blood on her thighs, That's the bread. And I think I interpret this to be an unconscious statement about patriarchy, because there's an exaggerated penis there that is fierce. And then the big blob on the right that has red eyes and teeth, that she says is a pile of dung. The other words for that, merde in French, that is exuded by the Antichrist. And it's full of bad smells. It stinks. And but it's BS. That's our language for it. It's BS, because one of the bases of Antichrist is lying, lies, the teaching that Satan is the father of lies. And those who build their life on lies or their politics are spreading BS, literally, into society, and therefore creating disorder. And here are some of her words in commenting on this painting of hers. And they are very fierce, very full of rage. The fiery dog bites at his own condition and does not burn with justice. The reddish lion stands for warlike men. The pale horse stands for luxury living and selfish pleasure. The black pig stands for creating sadness and uncleanness. And the wolf stands for robbing others. The quote, the darkness that stretches out many injustices is the black rope being stretched around. But the Son of Man is the Christ as a young man who is the beginning of justice, who watches over the strength of the union of mere knowledge and human work. Those are her words. And Christ and the prophets carry the manner of justice of God, put the devil to flight. Demonic forces will yield to Christ, who is, quote, a very strong warrior who breaks the head of injustice. And then the mother figure in the bottom, and the head topped with human dung. Quote, a monstrous and very black head appeared, having fiery eyes and ears like the ears of an ass, nostrils and mouth like the nostrils and mouth of a lion, crunching with a great jaw, cutting terribly, horribly, like horrible iron teeth. It moves with monstrous ugliness. It spreads a foul odor in the mountain and tears the institutions of the church to pieces with the crudest greediness. And then she addresses the Antichrist. You are the son of injustice, the cursed one of the cursed ones. You are a cave of injustice. Your work seek the pit of hell. You will live absorbed in your gluttony there. And that hellish place will vomit forth stink. The world will recognize in the stench the bitterness of death, the destroyer of destructions. Ultimately, she says, the devil has no power in good things, but only in evil things of eternal death. So she's full of rage, and she lets it out. And of course, this is what art does. It allows us to express ourselves, our deepest experiences, and to acknowledge them that way, to allow the grieving not to be sitting on it. And because a lot of people today, I think, are sitting on the fear, the anxiety of the end of democracy, and of course the end of the planet as we know it because of climate change, which is in fact being denied by a lot of power forces. And Donald Trump himself said that if the fossil fuel captains who visited him, captains of fossil industry, that they would give him $1 billion, he would undo all the environmental laws that Biden and others have forward. So I think that Hildegard paints her picture of Antichrist in the 12th century. Luca does it, Luca Signorelli in the early 16th century. And of course, remember the year 1500 was like a millennium, half a millennium moment. And the people were very aware of that in the 16th century. Obviously, millennium is 1,000 years, but 1500 is 500 years. So that sense of the apocalyptic was in the air at that time, especially in Italy. So that was part of the picture. But again, if Hildegard can apply the invasion of institution of the church in her day, which of course was very much running things in the 12th century, we have permission to apply the archetype of the Antichrist to institutions of our day, including, and this is why my book is not just about Trump, the Maga Movement. To me, the Maga Movement includes the Supreme Court today, which has been taken over by 6 mega people, and 3 of them deliberately appointed by Donald Trump, and of course all of them appointed by Leonardo Leo, who is a very important character in the whole mega movement, and the billions of dollars he's arranged, and he himself nominated each one of the 6 Supreme Court members. And what they've given us, of course, they, in my opinion, they have poisoned democracy by the decision to allow so much money into the process, and they're deconstructing, throwing out of the voting laws that were bought at such a heavy price. Many martyrs in the civil rights movement, and most recently, the opinion that is so destructive, will be so destructive of the planet, giving corporations the right to make decisions through the justice system, so-called, about environmental laws and so forth, taking it away from the experts, the scientists, and putting in the hands of justices, many of whom are easily bought, as we know, by forces of corporations. So, the Chevron decision. So, okay, let's move on now. So we're dealing with an archetype. And an archetype, yeah, we don't need these pictures anymore. An archetype carries a lot of power in it. And I end the book with a commentary from Carl Jung, because he wrote an essay on the Antichrist as archetype. And a contemporary female Jungian helps to translate it, if you will, and to give it meaning. And here are some of the allurements of the archetype as Jung talks about it. The Antichrist is an imitating spirit of evil who follows in Christ's footsteps like a shadow following the body. And Jung warned that the archetypes hold a seductive quality that lies in their numinosity. They can seize hold of the individual in a startling way, creating a condition amounting almost to possession, the consequences of which may be incalculable. Now, of course, Jung was also writing out of the context of Hitler, but that's the point, that a person who carries this archetype, this shadow energy, can do amazing things and convince and create a great following who will follow that person. People have talked about the cult of Trump, but that's what it's like. It's like a cult, amounting almost to possession and creating a schism in the human heart. And here's another telling of that archetype. It's someone who foments division, encourages violence, abuses people, lies, creates chaos, and contravenes norms of decency. And one who fascinates. I think that fascination is a very powerful element behind the attraction that Trump offers to some people, to many people. For one thing, the algorithms of social media, they are geared to key in to fascination. And to me, it's not unlike being mesmerized by a burning building. Uh, when there's a burning building, you focus on it. It draws your attention. It's fascinating. And that's really what's being talked about here. That part of the Antichrist is fascination. So, what are some of the topics that I'm treating? Well, first of all, is a very interesting story, the first chapter of the book about Sigmund Freud, that he visited the same painting that I visited, and he was utterly blown away. In fact, there's a whole book written, and it's a brilliant book, a beautifully written book, and very well researched, called Freud's Trip to Orvieto. It's a big book, very well done by an art historian from Yale. And the subtitle is The Great Doctor's Unresolved Confrontation with Anti-Semitism, Death, and Homoeroticism, His Passion for Paintings, and the Writer in His Footsteps. So Freud had this amazing experience. It was the year his father died. He was in mourning, which is Jewish tradition to mourn for a year. And he was just beginning his own psychoanalysis. So it was early in his career that he went to Orvieto and he was absolutely struck by this painting. He said it was the finest painting of his life, and Freud loved art and painting. So he returned 3 times to Orvieto to study this painting. And I found this extremely interesting, including story that this book was so well researched that he found Freud's letters when he was living in Paris as a young man. And Freud said that when he had off time, his friends would go to the museums and all this stuff, but he always chose to go to the top of Notre Dame Cathedral to be with the demons and the gargoyles. Now, this was when he was a young man. I just think that's so funny and interesting because the rest of his life was an effort to deal with the demons in our psyche. And I'm not saying he did a perfect job with it. He's not my favorite psychologist by any means, but 2 of his students are. Otto Rank is my favorite psychologist, and Carl Jung is my second favorite psychologist. And of course, as you know, they both studied with Freud and broke with him eventually in their own ways. But I just think I was blown away. First of all, I was struck by this painting, and then to learn that Freud had his whole life affected by it, and his psychology. Because in the chapel, there's not only the large painting of the Antichrist, but there's also a large painting of hell, and that's in my book, and then a large painting of the resurrection of the flesh, that's in my book, and of heaven. So Eros and Thanatos are being named in that chapel. And of course, that polarity, that dynamic became extremely important to Freud's entire project. So another chapter, of course, deals with first Christ as archetype. And because we have to talk first about Christ before we talk about Antichrist, because the Antichrist is in opposition to the Christ. And we have to remember that the Antichrist is not just a rational alternative to Christ, but the Antichrist, built into the Antichrist archetype, is the yearning to displace the Christ, to replace the Christ with the Antichrist. That's the energy around the Antichrist. And it is awfully interesting. The end of the book, I have a section on the blasphemy in Trump's world and is in his own head. Not only that he put out his own Bible with a absurd patriotic song about America, but that one study has been done of all the prayers that have been offered at all of Trump's rallies. This one man studied all of them, 58 prayers. And you see that these people are naming him as the Messiah. They're naming him as Christ. We're talking about the Christian nationalists and all these Christo-fascists who are trying to displace the Christ of Matthew 25, the Christ that puts compassion first, like Hildegard does in her painting over my shoulder here, with this man who is famous for his lies. Just last night, we received the latest research on what came forward under oath with the vice president and how Trump knew and told him he knew on November 13th that he had lost the election. But the entire January 6th event and everything that preceded it and the effort to change the electors, et cetera, the whole project that Trump conceived of was based on a lie that he knew was a lie. And here we are 4 years later, still worried that the same thing is going to repeat itself on this, after this November 5th. So this is the power of Antichrist and of evil. And we must know the difference between sin and evil. Now, this is my third book on evil. It's kind of funny because when I first came out with the archetype of original blessing, I got slaughtered by all kinds of theologians and screamers, theological screamers, including the head inquisitor in the Vatican and his boss, John Paul II, that I was throwing out original sin, et cetera, et cetera. But in fact, I have 4 chapters, one after each of the 4 paths in original blessing, about sin and evil. And here I am. I've written 3 books on you. The first one is a biggie, Sins of the Spirit, Blessings of the Flesh, Transforming Evil in Soul and Society. And it deals with the philosophy and theology of evil, and from many different perspectives, science and mystics and philosophers and theologians. And I'm proud to say that one theologian whom I respect very much, Diarmaid O'Murchie, author of Quantum Theology, etc., called this book a scholarly masterpiece, embodying a better vision and depth of perception far beyond the grasp of anyone single science, a breathtaking analysis. So this is not a superficial book. It took me years to explore the nature of evil. And one of my favorite findings was from Eric Fromm, who said that necrophilia grows when biophilia is stunted, that the real tension in life is between biophilia and necrophilia, love of life or love of death. And when you hear Donald Trump talk very often, 95% of the time he's talking about everything is dying and everything is terrible and everything is cataclysmic in America, et cetera, et cetera. So he's very much on the side of necrophilia. So to say that biophilia is the medicine is, I think, very Christ-like. It's the Christ saying, I've come that you may have life and have it in abundance. And it's the book of Ecclesiastes saying, this is wisdom, to love life. So eros, the love of life, is the heart of wisdom. And it's the heart of living authentically. Now, I point out that I think that there are 2 reasons why Americans are bad at talking about evil. One is that so many Americans, all the immigrants, who of course Trump is turning into, quote, venom, unquote, and stories about eating people's pets and so forth, hatred multiplied, that so many immigrants, and that's all of our ancestors here, except indigenous, came to America fleeing persecution, fleeing famine, fleeing religious wars. And so it's natural that their descendants would want to turn off that difficult history. And so Americans don't want to dwell on evil. We want to dwell on the future and how we can improve our lot and our situation. I think that's one reason why Americans have trouble talking about evil, which is why I came up with the new language in this book about comparing the 7 capital sins to the 7 chakras of the East. So bringing in both the Eastern and Western wisdom about evil, something that we need to do today because evil is a problem around the world. No culture, no religion, no race has a patent on evil. But a second reason I think that we have trouble talking about evil is that religion, formal religion in the West, has oversold sin and trivialized evil in the process. Evil is something much bigger than sin. For example, one of my important teachers, who was a co-teacher, Buck Ghosthorse, Lakota teacher, who was on our faculty for a while at ICCS, he said to me one day, he said, in our tradition, fear is the door in the heart that lets evil spirits in. Fear is a door in the heart that lets evil spirits in. So fear is the sin. But if the heart is not strengthened, then evil spirits come in. So when you're dealing with evil, you're dealing with evil spirits. And that's why I say the opposite of evil is not the good. Bad is the opposite of good. The opposite of evil is sacred. The sacred and evil operate in the same realms. Now, St. Paul said the same thing when he said our struggle against the powers and principalities. Powers and principalities are spirits, just like Buck Ghosthorse said. Spirits is the Indian word for angels. And there are good spirits and there are nefarious spirits. And Buck, of course, ended that one sentence and added, and so all prayer, he said, is strengthening our hearts so that evil spirits do not get in. Now, I would extend that. The heart is a 4th chakra. That's one of the 7 chakras. I think it applies to every one of our chakras. The 5th chakra, the chakra of the throat, or any of the 7 chakras, is a door. And interesting enough, of course, we have the language from the Christ in John's Gospel, I am the door. And that, therefore, we are empowered to stand up to those forces that return. They are immortal, so they're spiritual, because they return with every generation. The force of racism, denying certain groups the right to vote, for example. The forces of gluttony, which Hildegard names. And gluttony is not just about eating too much, it's also being in love with materialism, with things at the expense of life itself, etc. Now, the second book I wrote on evil is The Pope's War. Why Ratzinger's Secret Crusade has imperiled the church and how it can be saved. And so this is a book about evil in the Catholic Church in my lifetime, because we saw a great awakening that was welcomed not just by Catholics, but by the world in the Second Vatican Council, and that endorsed the gospel values of a preferential option for the poor, so forth, and that launched liberation theology in base communities and creation spirituality a couple of years after the council. But then there were two papacies over 34 years who tried to take all that back and substitute bring the Inquisition back, which they did, condemning, silencing 109 theologians, of which I was just one, and bringing back neo-fascist principles, displacing the great bishops and cardinals, saintly people like Archbishop Romero, now declared a saint, displacing them with Opus Dei characters. And by the way, the book just came out called Opus, and I didn't bring it here, but it's a marvelous book, so well researched, 450 pages about the real story of Opus Dei and how it has penetrated Washington, penetrated the Supreme Court, Leonardo Leo, and all these others who are behind Project 2025. The head guy of Project 2025 is thoroughly in bed with Opus Dei. And of course, I bring Project 2025 up strongly in this book. So this new book on evil is very different, it's short, but also it's inspired by artists. The artist who wrote the book of Apocalypse or book of Revelation, I've often felt whoever wrote it was on something, because it's just full of all these visions, crazy, wild visions. But also the artist Hildegard of Bingen and the artist Lucas Signorelli. And remember, in the 16th century, Martin Luther employed the archetype of the Antichrist for 25 years, right up to his last breath, from the age of 25, was it 20 to 45, something like that. Anyway, he employed it continually, and others got on board, Zwingli, John Calvin, John Knox. So all these reformers employed this archetype. Therefore, I say, why don't we have the right in the year 2024 to bring back this archetype? Jung says archetypes return when we need them. Well, folks, we need a way to name. And that's what I like about this book. It's so succinct. The name, the archetype of the Antichrist, is a succinct way of talking about evil. Now, you don't have to stick with the Christian story. Every religion talks about evil. And so you could talk about the anti-Buddha if you want. And of course, Judaism talks about it. And in fact, this archetype is drawn from Jewish apocalyptic literature. So this is so important that we have an archetype, a name for what we're feeling. Many people who've read this book have told me that they've been feeling this anxiety and didn't have a name for it. But when they read the book, it was named for them, and now they get it. It is a spiritual thing that they are encountering. Yes, evil is spiritual. That's what it means to talk about and paint demons whispering in the eyes of our leaders, our pseudo leaders, our so-called leaders, our narcissistic leaders who say things like, only I can fix it, which are words exactly from Mussolini, but Donald Trump uttered them when he was nominated in 2020. I remember the moment when he said those words. I couldn't believe it. And I remember seeing his visage, and he looked like Mussolini when he said it. So we are in a struggle, and it is about the future of our species. Absolutely. We now have counted, I think, 14 or 15 of our cousins, hominids. We know about the Neanderthals and our denizens and so forth. There are 14 now. What they all have in common is they've all gone extinct. We're the last ones standing, and there's absolutely no insurance, no guarantee that Homo sapiens is not going to go out of business. But climate change and all these wars going on are enough to rattle us and to depress many people, especially the young today. Shall we even bring children into the world, they are asking. and many other questions they are asking. Can our species not put aside its weaponry, its wars against each other, and realize that this unique planet that brought us forth and filled with so much other marvelous creatures and beauty, that it deserves defending. So our defense departments are not about planning to go to war with China or Russia with Ukraine or the Sudanese as the war or with Israel and the Palestinians. That's not the future of our species. The future is heeding the teachings, not only of Christ, but of Isaiah, of the Buddha, of Muhammad, that the real struggle is the inner struggle. That's the war that counts, not the war that we make against one another. So I'll just touch on one chapter is on redefining MAGA. For me, MAGA does not mean make America great again. It means make America grotesque again. And I go through the grotesqueness of slavery, the grotesqueness of committing genocide toward the indigenous peoples, including, but not limited to, are going after in the 19th century the buffalo, because this would contribute to the genocide of the native people, because the plains people were so dependent on buffalo. There were 30 million buffalo in America in the 19th century. And after the war against the buffalo, there were 500 standing. 30 million to 500. That is grotesque. And then, of course, the lynchings that followed after the Civil War, et cetera, et cetera. And there's a lot of grotesqueness going on now in this unsupreme court. And so I think that's what MAGA stands for, to wake up to the grotesqueness and do what Lincoln called calling on our better natures, And that is what the Christ stands for. The chapter on Christ, this chapter on Christ is also a chapter on Jesus and democracy, because I've never really seen this put into print, but I call especially on Meister Eckhart, because he goes into great depth about democracy and the value of the individual versus other forces. But actually, he gets this from, springboard is Thomas Aquinas. On the first page of the book, I quote Aquinas: Christ teaches the dignity of human nature and the full participation in divinity, which is truly humanity's happiness and the goal of human life. So if that's what's being taught, well, that is all people are created equal. And Meister Eckhart, who really develops that, does not say all men are created equal and women aren't, as Thomas Jefferson was writing, or all men are created equal except the ones we've dragged over here from Africa. Eckhart doesn't say that. Or all men are created equal who own property. Eckhart doesn't say that. So there is a tradition of democracy far older than Thomas Jefferson, and purer, if you will. Now, that I'm not meaning by that Jefferson and the whole Enlightenment movement that he represented and our founding fathers did not do something very great, because they established a system that they preferred because it was closer to democracy. But obviously, our history as a country has been to undo the slavery thing, and that cost us almost 1 million lives and many million more wounded people, Northerners and Southerners. And then when we thought we had accomplished something good, within a few years, the lynchings began and the Jim Crow laws and all that. So it took a nonviolent revolution in the 1950s and 60s. Many of us lived through that. To undo that and to establish laws of everyone can vote and the rest, but that's been destroyed, thrown out by Chief Justice Roberts and his mega crowd, who were mega before Trump. And the effort not only to destroy voting for everybody, that is still going on, of course, but the idea that corporations are people and they can pour as much money in and ask Elon Musk, as much money in as they want. So the billionaires can run our country, which is what this election is about. So the longest chapter is on 18 signs of the Antichrist in American politics. And I go into such things as the dark money takeover with Citizens United, the denial of climate change. Can't imagine anything that is more Antichrist than that. Jesus was a creation-centered, from the wisdom tradition, a creation-centered mystic and teacher. And of course, the 2020 election and the 2025 agenda that we're being promised if Trump wins this election. Of course, Christofascism, threats of violence, and of course, what I call the so-called abortion laws. Abortion is not the issue. The issue is the control of women's bodies. And the very document that killed Roe v. Wade, created by Alito, quotes not one, but two 17th century British lawyers who voted to burn women at the stake. So let's call it what it is. It's not really about abortion, because in Roe versus Wade, no woman is told they have to get an abortion. So I don't know what the Catholic Church or any other church is doing, screaming about that. It is about the right of women to make their moral decisions and bodily decisions. Let's call it what it is. So I have 18 of these issues. The last one is blasphemy and idolatry, where I take up these prayers for Trump and so forth, which he loves. And another one is, of course, supporting Putin and other dictators. But I chose 18 because 6 plus 6 plus 6 is 18. And I had to stop somewhere. And I thought that that number was appropriate. So that's a bit of a summary of what this book is about. I think it's important. I wrote it because I want to help keep Trump and Maga out of the White House and down the line out of the Supreme Court, etc. But of course, time is short. And so I'd like to have just a little brainstorming session and then some time for Q&A. But what I'd like to do in this brainstorming session is to ask you how we can help get this book out there fast, because time's running out. Unfortunately, the book is a month late because of the colored pictures. We were not told by the printer or the publisher that it would take extra time to print them. But finally, that's out. Now, as Dennis alluded to, the book has been out in audio form, which I recited, and also in ebook form, and for several weeks. But the colored version just came out this week. Arrived this week, I should say. They shipped it across the country. But I'd just like to throw out a few ideas that people have told me about to make this book. You know, Michelle Obama said, "Don't just." He said we have to do something, and this was my effort to do something. But I was called not by Michelle Obama. That came later. I was called by seeing that fresco and having this experience that this painting felt like Donald Trump. That is what gave birth to this book. But I'd just like to throw out a few ideas that have come my way, and then to invite others to throw out ideas so we all hear them. One of them is, I think, actually Dennis alluded to it, but it's to write a short uh, review, just a paragraph or so, in Amazon. But to do that, you have to buy the book from Amazon. But a lot of people look at that, and that makes a big difference regarding the circulation of the book. That was one idea. Another is politicians, to bring the book to the attention of politicians. Now, we sent the book for free to all the Democratic congressmen and women and senators in the country. The only response I've had so far has been from Jamie Raskin, who's probably my favorite congressman in the country, so I'm honored by that. But to let people know, maybe your Congress people, and especially those in the 7 critical states, that this book is there. Because one thing I've done this book, see, I've never written about the Antichrist before, because for me, the right wing, the fundamentalists, owned this title. I won't call it archetype because they didn't treat it as an archetype. They treated it as a bludgeon to beat up on other theologies. But what I've done really is to seize the archetype from the right wing, from the fundamentalists, and to see that it has application to those who believe in a philosophy of the common good. And also, that's why the Freud discovery was so important to me, because Freud, of course, was an atheist and a secular atheist. And I believe, though, that he was so taken by this painting that this is a door, this is an opening to bring secular leftists into this discussion about evil. That's the thing about an archetype. It doesn't belong to a particular religious tradition. Now, Tom Hartman, who did a very worthwhile interview with me on his program about this, he made the distinction between a political antichrist and a religious antichrist. That the metaphor is there in both spheres, and that's fine with me. But that's my point. Like any political movement, you want as many people on board as possible. And the fact that that's why Freud is in the first chapter, because that opens a door, I think, to a big consensus that we can talk about evil together. So recruiting your politicians, letting them know that this is language that can help get them elected. Because if we can convert some of these people who've had this narrow version of the Antichrist and linked it to a fundamentalist politics and attitude, if we can melt that, showing there's this other option, which in fact is the historical option, and it even goes back to the Reformation time and further, then I think we could score some converts. And of course, discussion groups, church groups, or book clubs, or what have you, on podcasts. And that's another thing, is media. If you have access to media, get yourself on a podcast program, get yourself on a local talk show, or get me on a solid program. Contact Dennis. Well, first contact the media. Well, you can get information from Dennis. There's press releases and so forth. But start talking it up. We've got only a month left before, and of course, as you know, voting has already begun. So we don't have any time to waste. And then one other idea that came my way, someone wrote and said, if anyone has a high profile connection, to send the contact info to Dennis, who will send out a personal letter, including links that we can share. So we do have this 12-minute interview with Tom Hartman, which has already been seen by 100,000 people on YouTube. That's not nothing. And he is a very bright guy. And I'm honored that when I met him for the first time in this program, he told me that he's been studying my work and creative spirituality for years. So I was touched by that. But yeah, think of media, and of course, social media. And of course, that's usually a younger generation. Fine. Ask your kids or grandkids, is this interesting? Now, just this morning, I recorded a 50-minute interview or dialogue conversation on the book. And they're going to cut it up into 10-minute pieces, which is how YouTube usually works. So we will have more material that we can share with you there, as well as the Hartman interview. And of course, we're recording this event too. So what I'd like to do is just throw it open. Are there other ideas about how to get this book out there for the purpose of affecting the election? If there are, please throw them out there.
Once again, I'll ask you to raise your hand, go to the React button under your Zoom toolbar and click on Raise Hand. And Ellen Kennedy was quick to the mark on that. So go ahead, Ellen.
Ellen, aren't you at the Nuns in the Bus gathering?
No,
at
I'm
this
at the
time?
hotel next to the nuns in the bus.
Oh,
I don't
great.
have
How did it
to
go?
get
Good.
till 5:30. So
Welcome. Oh, I see.
thank you, and thank you for Gracious Spirituality bringing us all together, the global kinship. I have a couple of ideas. I just wanted to say it's been my experience that this book, there's an energy around it that you can feel it. I really, coincidences, synchronicities, I can't even tell you how many things have happened where this book has made a connection. One being a friend of mine sent information on Nuns on the Bus. Dennis is going to put a link into their press kit so you can read all about them. But Matthew, actually, you met the founder, right? Sister Simone Campbell.
Simone Campbell and I have been friends for some time, yes. In
And
fact,
she was,
we have a great picture of us together with the Hildegard habit on that was
yeah.
taken at a conference, called the Action Conference, a number of years ago, yeah.
Well, Dennis is going to post that because I'm Catholic, and I can't stand what's happening. And I remember when Trump was first running, we were actually told to vote pro-life from the pulpit. I don't know anybody else experienced that, but we were actually, you vote, vote your church, you vote your conscience. This time the Pope has come out and said, they're both wrong. So do whatever you want. Basically, he's not, nobody's saying we have to vote pro-life. And the nuns in the bus, they haven't gone for 6 years. They're out now because their mission is to go. They started in Philadelphia. They're stopping in 16 stops. I'm in New Haven right now. They're going to end in San Francisco. Oh, I can't get it up. But what they're doing is they're educating people on voting multi-issues. So they're going this afternoon. They're in a women's health center, and so they're pressed with them, and they're bringing publicity to all these places and telling people to vote multi-issue, not on one issue. And brilliantly, what they've done is they've taken 2025, all the points, and opposite it, they've put creation spirituality, I would say, point to it. It's absolutely fascinating. So Matthew sent me an email saying, boy, I wish we could get the books on the bus. And that's when I looked to see where they were, and they're in New Haven today. So I drove from Boston. I've got 8 books and I've got 30 flyers. And Dennis has these really good flyers that if you want a PDF of them to print out and have, I'm sure he could do that. So I'm going to meet them at 5:30 and give them the books, and the books will be on the bus going cross country. We're also invited to sign our name on the bus. So Matthew, I'm signing your name on the bus, so you'll be traveling cross country. The other thing I've done is I'm a volunteer for Harris, and I'm very active in New Hampshire, and that's where all the young people are. She is hired, she's paying these amazingly brilliant college kids to run her campaign. That's where the young people are, and I've met them. They get it. They want the book. I've got books for them, and so I just say do whatever you can. Do whatever you can. Time is really running out, and I had just personally, I had a dear friend call me from North Carolina this morning, and she said she couldn't stop crying. And she said, I don't even know what I'm crying about anymore. And then she started listing all the things that are happening in the world. And she said, I can't stop crying. And Matthew, you alluded to that people are carrying grief, really carrying deep grief about what's happening to our planet and the situation we're in right now and what's happening in the Middle East. So that's what I'm doing something, and I'll see what the Holy Spirit shows me next. But I'm going to meet with the nuns on the bus. Thank you, Matthew, for writing the book.
Thank you so much, Ellen.
Thank you.
Bonnie Sundance, I don't know if you have your camera, if you can turn your camera on, but go ahead with your question.
So I'm just offering a connection, suggesting contacting Green Faith International and Fletcher Harper, because they reach a lot of progressive, spiritual and religious people. Thank you.
Excellent, thank you.
Can you send Dennis the, do you have a address or a individual to contact?
You can look up Green Faith International online. And
You don't have a specific.
and as I said,
Okay.
to ask
Yeah.
to talk to Fletcher Harper.
Oh, Fletcher Harper.
Okay, great, thanks,
Great.
Bonnie.
Thank you. Thank you.
Joan, if you're, please turn on your camera if it's available, or go ahead with your question. You're muted, Joan.
Sorry. So much. Thank you so much. I am really, I can't tell the energy, what Ellen was saying, it's true. There's energy around this book. I've read it about 3 times. And I can't stop talking about it. And it's becoming, I metabolized it. And what I'm doing is, I remember a professor of mine once said, each one teach one. So what I can do on my level is I'm going to get a bunch of the books and just walk down, I have lots of friends and in my neighborhood, and I'm just going to walk down and talk to each one of them and and give them a book if they would like. And then I will talk to my friends, which I already have, and offer to give them a book. So this whole idea of each one teach one, I feel, is how I can contribute to this critically important movement. Thank you.
Wow, that's wonderful. Where do you live? Can I ask?
Yeah, sure. I live in Connecticut. It's
Connecticut.
like
Uh-huh.
near Middletown, and just finished being marriage and family therapy director at University of St. Joseph. So, I got a lot of connections with the Mercies and so forth, but also with lots of other people.
Great. I love that.
Yeah, I
Great
love it
idea.
too. Yeah, that's how I feel
I
like
love
what
it.
I can do.
That's wonderful.
Thank you.
That's great,
One to
thank you,
one.
Joan.
Thank you.
Don't see any other hands up at this moment. There are a number of comments I will note in the chat box. So I will say to everyone, you might want to scan that and see if you see things that might, suggestions and ideas and approaches that might appeal to you. And I will also, Matt, be sending the contents of the chat box to Dennis because there are some concrete things in there as well that he might act on.
Yeah, now I noticed someone mentioned Steve Colbert. At least 8 people have mentioned that to me. I would love to um, share it with him. And does anyone have an in with him? How does one get on with Steve Colbert? If someone has that, and all of MSNBC, yes, we're sending it to all those people, Rachel Maddow and Lawrence O'Donnell and Ari Melber and all those. Yeah, I think they would be ideal. But and also to religious. Now, does anyone have connection with the National Catholic Reporter, for example? We had a connection with Sojourners that was sent out by John Deere yesterday, and that would be a very good source, I think. But also NCR. By the way, Sister Joan Chittister is reading the book now, She's having a gathering in Erie, Pennsylvania, which is, of course, a super important state, with Liz Cheney. And 4,000 people have signed up for it. And Ellen, who you just met, is going to be at that meeting. And so we might get a word in there edgewise. But I think
Great.
that's pretty interesting that Joan Chittister is sponsoring Liz
Yes.
Cheney in Erie, Pennsylvania, and they're already booked, I think. Maybe there's a little room left, but 4,000 people are attending.
That's awesome. We have two more hands up. I think we've got time for these two. We're approaching the end of our time. Go ahead, Marilyn. You're muted. Yeah.
Thank you so much for all you do. You are a gift and a blessing to us all. I'm wondering about organizing places where your book can be read out loud, person by person, and just call attention wherever those places are to who's reading what. Here, I'm going to stop and listen. Just kind of groups that could take on your writing and broadcast it. Thank you.
Thank you.
Great idea. Thanks, Marilyn. And Patty, yes.
Hi, I just had one other idea is that I have already contacted Faithful America to see if there's some way I can mail them a book, but you know, it's a staff and you don't know who's actually the person who decides what goes in their mail, their email. I'm a member of Faithful America. They're against Christian nationalism. And I get emails from them almost every day. So this fits right in with their programming. Okay, so we'll see if they respond. Okay.
Excellent. Excellent. Yeah.
Great. Thank you, Patty. And Carolyn, yes, it looks like we have time to get another question in.
Yeah, I just had thought about a lot of the local stores that specialize in books like this. I'm thinking about the one on Telegraph in Berkeley that used to be associated with CS, and East-West bookstores that frequently feature you, Matt. If there was a copy of the book close to where people are checking out in bookstores where people are likely to look for this kind of book, it seems to me like that might be a good investment. It would raise interest and potentially sales. And you could combine that with the reading too in your local bookstore.
Mm-hmm. All right. Thank you, Carolyn. Matt, I wonder if you have any closing words that you wanted to leave us with, and then Penny has a closing for us at the end.
I guess I'll just forget it. Yeah. I punched it right away, but
somebody is
that's right.
Somebody is unmuted. If you would mute yourself, please. Okay. Oh, I see. There we go. All right. Matt, were there any closing thoughts you'd like to leave us with?
Someone asked who's the artist behind me here. That's MC Richards. And the title of the painting is written in Birth of a New Cosmos, Birth of a New Cosmos. So she was on our faculty for years. And of course, she picked up on the work of the new cosmology and so forth. So that's where that came from. Well, maybe I'll end this way with the dedication to the book. I dedicate this book to the young leaders of the world and all those who are not in denial about climate change and recognize our Earth as sacred and worth saving. And to those who believe that a government of the people, by the people, and for the people is an aspiration worth struggling to preserve and improve upon. And who prefer biophilia to necrophilia, joy to grievance, love to hate, and justice to greed that guarantees injustice. So that's kind of a summary of the book, I guess, the dedication page. So I thank everybody for your presence and encouragement and your ideas that came forward. And I encourage you again, it's not about me, but it is about the future of our planet, the future of our species, the future of our country. And of course, people are anxious. And of course, people are grieving. And so we all want to do what we can do to shake things up and have more chances for ourselves and the younger generation. Thank you.
Absolutely.
Thank
Thank
you.
you.
Thank you, Matt.
Thank
Yeah.
you.
Penny, I believe you have some closing thoughts for us.
Well, it's always good to bring in the poets. And today we bring in Fred Lamott and his poem Election. I voted. I voted for the rainbow. I voted for the cry of a loon. I voted for my grandfather's bones that feed beetles now. I voted for a singing brook that sparkles under a North Dakota bean field. I voted for salty air through which the whimbrel flies south along the shores of 2 continents. I voted for melting snow that returns to the wellspring of darkness, where the sky is born from the earth. I voted for demonic mushrooms in the loam and the old democracy of worms. I voted for the wordless treaty that cannot be broken by white men or brown, because it is written in star semen, new moons, thistle sap, and weevil hieroglyphs on the prairie oak. I voted for ancestral bison scrawled on the seeping limestone cavern of your heart. I voted to erase straight lines, right angles, and the surveyor's plat map. I voted for the sacred curve of rivers and hills. I voted to wash away both white and black in a rainbow of tears. I voted to keep the edges of the vineyard ragged and ungleaned for the hungry stranger. I voted for lonely pilgrims who wander in the ambiguous land between male and female. I voted for open borders between death and birth. I voted for the commonwealth of the ancient forest, a larva for every beak, a wing-tinted lupin for every moth's disguise, a well-fed mammal's corpse for every colony of maggots. I voted for the mule that Jesus rode into the city, proclaiming forgiveness of debts, who is the same mule Rumi rode backwards into exile, gazing eastward toward eternal loss. That mule, I tell you, will be president. I voted to compost and manure the floor of the Senate, entangling 100 senators in hemp moss and honeysuckle. I voted to turn the dome of Congress into an enormous hummingbird feeder. I voted for a motherland where politics dissolve into folk music, storytelling, fermented cabbage, totem carved hose handed down from mother to son in the fireside quietness of heroic listening. I voted on the ballot of a fallen leaf of sycamore that cannot be erased, for it becomes the dust and rain and then a tree again. I voted for the local, the small, the brim that does not spill over, the abolition of waste, the luxury of enough. I voted for more fallow time to cultivate wild flowers, more recess in schools to cultivate play, more leisure, tax-free, more space between days. I voted to increase the profit of evening silence and the price of thrush song. I voted for 10 million stars in your next inhalation.
Oof. Thank you, Penny. And thank you once again, Matt, for your words of wisdom and your activism. And thanks to all for being with us today. As always, I will be posting the recording of this gathering. If you go to YouTube, search for Creation Spirituality Communities, you will find there a playlist called Global Kinship, and it should be up there by later this evening. You can find all of our recordings there. Thanks, and we'll see you next month.
Well done. Thank you.